To order, there are two of them. These public hearings are being held pursuant to Section 465 of the Local Government Act. All members of the public will be given a reasonable time to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that are the subject of these hearings. All information, correspondence, petitions, or reports that have been received by noon today concerning the subject bylaws have been circulated to Council and are available to the public as part of the meeting package. For each public hearing, staff will provide their report, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Members of the public who have pre-registered to speak have been added to the speakers list in the order that requests were received. Anyone who is not pre-registered may call into the conference line during the live meeting by calling the meeting conference line at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. I will provide an opportunity for public comment according to the speakers list, followed by comment from those who have just joined the meeting. Speakers will be asked to state their name and civic address. Please note that all representations, whether written, in person, or electronic, are available to the public for viewing as part of the public record. Remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker and should include all of the relevant information in their presentation. Further opportunity will be afforded to all members of the public to speak a second or third time with new information only once all persons have had an opportunity to speak. Council may ask questions of staff, the applicant, and the public, but once a public hearing is closed, no new information can be received. Council debate on the bylaws will take place during the regular council meeting following the conclusion of the public hearing. The Deputy Corporate Officer will now provide information on the notice of these public hearings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Notice for the public hearings was given by posting on the notice board at Municipal Hall and on the district's website, as well as advertising in the Summerland Review editions of July 1st and July 8th. In addition, for public hearing number 2 regarding zoning amendment bylaw number 2021-022 for 11510 Blair Street, 8 notices were mailed to owners and occupiers of surrounding properties on June 30th, 2021.
Thank you. So we will start with public hearing number 1, which is zoning bylaw amendment number 2021-20 concerning agritourism accommodation Z21-008. And I will pass this over to our Director of Development Services, Brad Dolivet.
Thank you. I'm just going to wait till the slides come on the screen. Okay, thank you. So, next slide, please. Sorry. No worries. So in March of 2021, we received a request from the Chamber of Commerce for the allowance of temporary camping or agritourism accommodation to be allowed on all agricultural lands that are subject to the district zoning bylaw. And their request specifically stated that the district limits stays of the agritourism accommodation use to recreational vehicles only, that there be a 3-night maximum stay, to limit the number of self-contained spaces or stalls to 3 per night for each stall, that the farm parcel size must be over 3 to 5 acres in size, and also the chamber recommended that there should be a fee for this service. And actually, there's a mistake on the slide that it should be $50 to $100 payable to the chamber is what they requested. Next slide, please. So in staff's interpretation of that request, we reviewed the agricultural land use reserve regulation, and a agritourism activity is a specific and defined farm use activity that's allowed within the agricultural land reserve. And there's a number of proposed uses that are listed on this slide that would fall under the agritourism activity use. And just as some examples, a heritage exhibit, a tour of agricultural land, a cart, sleigh, or tractor rides on agricultural land, harvest festivals, and corn mazes. So these are all defined as a tourist operation that would be complementary to the principal use of agriculture that's found within the property. Next slide, please. So as opposed to the agritourism activity portion, which is a farm use and cannot be restricted by local government regulations, the accommodation portion of an agritourism activity, which is the subject of this public hearing, can be restricted by local government regulations and has been historically by the District of Summerland through our zoning bylaw. The accommodation portion of the use, however, must be, according to the Agricultural Land Use Reserve regulation, it has to be specific and related to an agritourism activity that is found on the site. So if it's corn maze, that there'd be one on site, and then the allowance of agritourism accommodation could be permitted. Furthermore, the Agricultural Land Use Reserve regulation allows that that if accommodation is to occur on site, that the land be located on land assessed as farm, that the total developed area of the accommodation use is a maximum of 5% of the total parcel, that the accommodation is limited to a total of 10 sleeping units, and that accommodation is provided on a seasonal or short-term basis only. Next slide, please. So now getting into the district zoning bylaw and our specific regulations. Currently, right now, our agritourism accommodation, our zoning bylaw has a definition for agritourism accommodation within it. That means the provision of short-term sleeping accommodations for tourists on a property classified as farm under the BC Assessment Act. Typical uses include, but are not limited to, farm bed and breakfasts, seasonal farm cabins, campsites, and recreational vehicle sites. So, like I mentioned before, currently this use is not listed in the district's agricultural zones, and therefore it's not permitted within our agricultural zones. So, if a proposal was to come forward right now to propose this use, the ways that we would consider that proposal and bring it forward for consideration to council would be either through a temporary use permit or a site-specific rezoning application for that property. And that's historically what we've done in the past with these type of proposals. Both of those processes, however, can take up to 3 to 5 months and a significant amount of staff time as well as public consultation in order for a farm operator to have a agritourism accommodation use on their parcel. Next slide, please. So what the proposed bylaw amendments that are the subject of this public hearing are proposing is to allow agritourism accommodation as an accessory use in the A1 agricultural small acreage zone, as well as the A2 agricultural large acreage zone. And in addition to that as well, there's a new section 716, which is a specific use regulation section that is specific for agritourism accommodation uses, and has further criteria for what would be the criteria for allowing agritourism accommodation on an agricultural parcel. And just to build on, and elaborate a bit on what those criteria are, that the minimum parcel size is 2 hectares, that if it's a building that's being proposed for agritourism accommodation, that all all the bedrooms be contained within one building. Next slide, please. That the maximum number of bedrooms is 4 within for the agritourism accommodation use. That the maximum number of consecutive stays per person is 10 days. That no bedroom within the agritourism accommodation use be larger than 20 meters squared. That no kitchens are permitted within a bedroom. And then as well that there'd be a parking requirement for each bedroom that's being proposed. And then for the request from the chamber with regards to the request for allowing campground stalls for agritourism accommodation, again, minimum parcel size would be 2 hectares. The campground use would have to be sited within the farm home plate. The campground use be sited 10 meters from all property lines. That the maximum number of campground stalls is 3, and the maximum number of consecutive stays per person within the stall is 3 as well. And there's a couple other criteria I won't get into, but next slide, please. So we consulted with the Agriculture Advisory Committee on these proposed amendments back in April. The Agriculture Advisory Committee recommended that the district initiate the zoning bylaw amendment. However, there was a proviso to the recommendation that this be granted on a 1-year trial basis, and that would include monitoring and input further from the committee and reporting back to the committee for comments regarding the addition of agritourism accommodation as an accessory use in the agriculture use zone. With that regard, staff is also recommending that we report back to council and the committee in October of 2022 next year to follow this recommendation. And we are planning to do that as part of this bylaw amendment. May 21 of 2021 as well, the Agriculture Advisory Committee provided additional comments for the district, that there's notification to adjacent landowners, that there be campsites to be located within a farm home plate, that there be require the signing of disclosure statements for all patrons of a proposed agritourism accommodation use, and to restrict trespassing onto adjacent agricultural properties. And all those requirements have now been included as part of the proposed bylaw amendments in front of council tonight. With regards to the Advisory Planning Commission, we presented to the commission as well the proposed bylaw amendments, and there were some comments from the commission that there may be different types of farms that would be interested in this. That perhaps as well there's some comments made that the proposed site-specific use regulations were too restrictive. They also recommended that no hard infrastructure, but however, that we should allow power to be connected to avoid the use of generators. And so that actually was one of the changes we made to the proposed bylaw amendments as well. But in general, they supported the zoning bylaw amendment as proposed. Next slide. External agencies, the Ministry of Agriculture provided some great comments just to reduce the number of bedrooms from 5 to 4 to be compliant with Section 24 of the use regulation. And we actually made that change as well before bringing forward the bylaw for first reading, to consider that both a campground and a building has to be less than 5% of the total parcel in terms of the total agritourism accommodation use, which we accommodated that change as well. Agricultural Land Commission as well supported the inclusion of agritourism accommodation as a permitted use because it is an allowable use within the ALC. They also supported that the total area of both a campground and a building use be less than 5% of the parcel size. There was some concerns from the ALC, however, that if we are allowing agritourism accommodation within one building, that this could be used as a secondary residence. And that is something we'll have to be cautious of moving forward with this bylaw amendment. Next slide. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Deputy Corporate Officer, was any correspondence received on this public hearing?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we've received 2 written submissions during the statutory notification period. One submission was in conditional support from Dwayne Ross of Prairie Valley Road, and one was in non-support from Beverly Harding of Robertson Road.
Thank you. The applicant has the opportunity to speak first at this public hearing. And please state your name and your civic address for the record before beginning, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Boot.
Dallas?
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Right now, it's a district-led amendment that was not part of a formal submission through an application. We do have speakers on the list, but as of right now, it was brought forward by the district.
Okay, my apologies, my apologies. So I will follow the speakers list then, and that shows that Lee Morrow is the first speaker this evening.
Yes, Madam Mayor, councilors, I hope you can hear me, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on the proposed amendment to the bylaw in regards to agritourism accommodation. My name is Lee Morrow. I live at 8603 Robertson Avenue in Summerland, and directly behind my house is a parcel of ALR land that fits the criteria for this zoning amendment to potentially have camping allowed. While I understand that the ideas for accommodation to be made available on ALR land that would create economic diversity for farmers and provide a pastoral environment for campers, not all ALR land is the same. And the first slide that I saw this evening is clearly not a fair representation of ALR land in residential areas. 5711 White Avenue is an example of these anomaly plots that would have greatly impacting circumstances on our quality of life as Summerland residents if they were allowed by this amendment to have camping permitted. 5711 White Avenue is a 10-acre parcel of ALR land, mostly invested in cherries. A section of this land runs in an L formation, and if you can pull it up on a map, you will see this configuration. My backyard and my neighbors on both Robertson Avenue and Happy Valley all flank this smaller section of the plot. It is a narrow piece of land, approximately an acre in size, and would be the natural selection for a campsite, as it is all flat terrain, recently cleared of apple trees, and has existing water and a power source. Even allowing 3 camping units in their trucks or cars would greatly distract from our enjoyment of our home, as our backyards are so close to this section of the property. The 10-meter setback from property lines is not sufficient in our situation. Our privacy would be dramatically impacted as we all utilize this back area of our homes adjacent to this parcel. We would be concerned about potential noise of campers directly joining our backyards. We're concerned about garbage that might be left and attracting animals and rodents to this area. We're also worried about the unsightliness and the visual unpleasantness of looking out our windows or sitting on our decks to see trucks and campers now parking close enough to ascertain what we're putting on the barbecue. In addition, the permission of campfires, even if confined to just one, is extremely dangerous. The risk of fire, as the land is now extremely dry since the apple trees were cut down and only the stumps left in the ground, is a huge concern for all of us. I would lay awake at night wondering if the campers had completely extinguished their sparks. I would ask council to review the situation for residents such as myself and only grant agritourism accommodation for parcels of land that do not encroach into residential communities such as ours. Perhaps a variance would be needed for camping on ALR land that directly borders residential communities such as ours, so our concerns could be voiced prior to any changes, even the proposed one-year pilot project. We chose Summerland over many, many locations in the Okanagan because of the privacy, the quietness, and the rural feeling of Robertson Avenue. Please do not destroy our enjoyment of our own property by allowing campers to become a part of our backyards. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Morrow. Next up is Ron Kubek.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and staff. Ron Kubek, 6611 Giants Head Road. Thank you for considering this option. The provincial government through the ALC encourages agritourism, something Summerland currently does not. We at the Chamber noted that we needed short-term accommodation and the need for agritourism to support our sector. We note that there's nowhere to stay in Summerland with some temporary campsites, such as the one down in Trout Creek, full with year-round residents. We felt that a 3-day minimum with maximum 3 units on 2 hectares or more properties would be ideal as a start. In North America, there's a great operation called Harvest Host that does what we are trying to do. At the Chamber, we owe it to all of our business community to try and find legal places for people to stay in Summerland. And that's why this was suggested at a meeting with staff on March 25th, 2021. We were hoping to have in place for this season, but due to a staff error, it was not coming to a public hearing until mid-July. We hope that we can help the farmers, orchardists, vineyards, wineries, cideries, and existing businesses in Summerland by getting this passed. We hope to help them because of the devastating traffic shutdown after the March 29th to July 1st lockdown of this year. We want to encourage people to see where their agricultural products come from, and we want to have a place for them to stay. We would hope the council make this a permanent change to the bylaw rather than a 1.5-year amendment. We wish to help out the business community, and short-term recommendations by committees and staffs are not in the long-term interest, we believe, of the business community. We note, and I note the first speaker's comments, that what we worked with staff on is that this was restricted to farm plates only. So where someone has an existing farm plate, this is the only place that an operation can go. In addition, we're not advocating for anything different than what the province is suggesting. And currently there is a campfire ban in the whole province of BC. So there would be no chance to have campfires right now. I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to you passing this successfully for the hopes of the agricultural and the business community in Summerland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kubek. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this public hearing, or would one of you wish to speak again? I'll ask a second time. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this public hearing? And I'll ask a third time. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this public hearing? Okay. Council, do you have questions of staff or questions to the public for clarification, if you like? Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Carlson.
Yes, thank you. Question for staff. When this first came to us, one of the things we discussed was what about properties that are leased out, that aren't farmed directly by the owner of the property, but are leased out to other people, and how would they fit into how would the rules apply to those properties?
Through your chair to Councillor Holmes, I think that we have some specific use regulations proposed, such as it being located within the farm home plate, it being accessory to the principal use of agriculture. So therefore, like there would be the need for the farm home plate to be defined. If it's a property that is being leased, and as well the property that say as a residential dwelling on it is also being leased, that could be part of the provisions of the agreement we enter with the owner of the land, is that it be monitored to ensure that there's no activity with a proposed use that would be in non-conformance with our proposed regulations that are being proposed for council tonight. But we wouldn't want to restrict that, I guess, if there's a proposal that would be on leased land.
So who would be allowed to apply for permission, the owner or the leaseholder?
We always defer for any application to the landowner because lease arrangements change over time. So landowner approval would be required for any application, but we would recommend that they talk with their leasee through that process.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question about the logistics of who's going to be administering and enforcing. For example, if we ask that applications be made and a license and each individual property is registered, that's one piece, and then there's also the piece of bylaw and enforcement. And so I'm just wondering, the process of creating what it is you need to do in order to even get registered, and then the process of going through all of the applications and the process of issuing a license, and then the process of following up to make sure that those people are following that rule. I'm just wondering, is the district in a position, and do we have the capacity to actually administer that right now, or is the chamber going to be doing part of that work?
Through the chair to Councillor Carlson, that's a great question. I think that this is I proposed in the presentation a one-year trial basis of approval where we want to do monitoring of the one-year timeframe and determine the impact that these proposed zoning changes have on agricultural properties and also adjacent properties next to agricultural land. I think we're going to be, for any of those that are uptaking and taking advantage of the new zoning and bylaw amendments, we're going to be actively reviewing them, monitoring them, gathering information as well, like the type of people using the campground use or a building use, and then being able to report on that in a year's time frame. So I think that we will be trying to have an active presence as well. The way we've set this up, and as part of the further bylaw changes that are not the subject of this public hearing, for example, the business license bylaw amendment, we are hoping to utilize that license to ensure that the operation is reviewed on an annual basis to ensure that there's conformance to our regulations.
Thank you. Just to follow up then, if we set out on this, is it possible that we can have an understanding of who will be involved in that review process and what it is that they will be looking at, just as so we don't, necessarily rush to do it or forget to do it or come around to, an election and then realize that we didn't do it and it just continues on because it's in a bylaw and we'll just continue doing it until we get around to reviewing. So I'm just wondering if we can make sure that that process goes in tandem with actually laying out the program. I don't know if that's been given any thought, but I think it's important.
If I may, through the chair to Councillor Carlson, I think that's a great idea. I think that the time to discuss that would be maybe during the third reading report, following the closure of the public hearing, where we can talk more about the administrative changes and directions from council to staff as to how we want to manage this moving forward. But the currently right now before council is just the zoning consideration was part of this public hearing.
Anybody else have a question of staff? Question for clarification of the public? Councillor Traynor.
I apologize if this is in the report and I missed it, but does the owner of the property have to be there? If there's campers there, is somebody there on the property as well?
It's not specified per se. However, again, it has to be cited within the farm home plate that indicates that there has been a farm home plate already developed. It may not be the owner that's living in there. It could be leased out. But that is something that we could require as part of the issuance of a license for an operator. We are proposing, as part of our business license bylaw amendment, that we enter an agreement with the operator for a number of reasons that were recommended from the Agriculture Advisory Committee, but also could be to have a presence on site for the use to be allowed.
That might be something that council wants to consider. That might help alleviate people who live around a farm and they're concerned about campers coming. I'm not saying that we need to do that. I'm just saying that that's something that we might want to discuss, is whether we want to put that in. And as this likely will be a trial for a year, we could try something like that. So I'll just see what the other councillors think about that.
Okay, other questions? Okay, and I'll just ask council if they had the opportunity to read the 2 pieces of correspondence that the deputy corporate officer spoke to. Good, okay. Thank you. Okay, I guess we are done then, and I will close public hearing number 1. And we'll now move on to the second public hearing, zoning bylaw amendment number 2021-022 for 11510 Blair Street, Z21-006. And Alex is presenting on this.
Good evening, Council. So an application was received by the District of Summerland for a site-specific text amendment to allow an additional dwelling located outside of the farm home plate on the subject property to be used by the landowner's immediate relatives. In the OCP, the future land use designation of the subject property is agricultural, and it is zoned A1 agricultural small acreage zone. These land uses are fairly consistent with the neighboring properties. It should be noted that the property is also located within the agricultural land reserve and as such is subject to ALC regulations. These regulations are particularly relevant because in 2019, the province updated the Agricultural Land Commission Act to better protect ALR land from farming, for farming. One key change included directly addressing the construction of mega mansions and speculation in the ALR by limiting the size of primary residence and authorizing the ALC to approve applications for additional residences for non-farm use. This change, this change included a phase out of a long-standing rule that had allowed ALR landowners to place small secondary residences in the ALR without ALC approval, so long as it was a manufactured home for immediate family members. Owners of ALR land who wish to site a manufactured home for immediate family members on their property still have until December 31st, 2021 to do so. The use regulation classifies additional residences as permitted non-farm uses that may be prohibited by local governments. At this time, the district's zoning bylaw allows additional dwellings in the A1 and A2 zones for secondary suites or temporary or full-time farm workers with ALC approval. As such, the applicant is requesting a site-specific text amendment to allow for an additional residence for the placement of a manufactured home for their parents in accordance with the ALR use regulation. These photos provide a little bit more context to the site and application. The top 2 images show the location where the proponents would like to site the manufactured home. The bottom 3 photos show the areas around the main house and the agricultural uses on the property. The applicant has noted that the manufactured home would be used by their retired parents, allowing an additional residence on the ALR for a relative, particularly an aging parent, was identified in the Ministry of Agriculture's 2020 policy intentions paper on residential flexibility in the ALR. Although there is little policy direction or guidance from the ministry or the ALC at this time, the requested amendment currently meets ALC regulations. The intent of locating residential buildings within the farm home plate is in order to reduce the impact of development on arable farmland. The applicant is proposing to locate the additional dwelling at the north end of the property outside of the farm home plate. The rationale for this location is twofold. The proposed siting area is not suitable for farming due to a frost pocket. Further, the location provides privacy from the principal dwelling as well as from the neighboring property. Staff recognize that there may be concerns about additional residences for family not being used for their intended purposes, such as short-term rental or short-term vacation rental or other rental accommodations not related to the farm use on the property. To address this concern, staff recommend that a restrictive covenant be registered on title to ensure that the dwelling is used by the owner's immediate family and that the dwelling is removed when the use is no longer required for family purposes. Using restrictive covenants in this way is a fairly common practice on agricultural land to have more added protection. Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.
Hello. Did we get any other correspondence on this one, Dallas?
Madam Mayor, there were no written submissions received during the statutory notification period.
Okay, thank you. Kay Weeb is, I believe, with us. I can't really tell from the names on the screen. I'm inviting you, if you wish to speak first, to go ahead and do that. If you choose not to, that is totally up to you. Okay, and if there is anyone else attending this public hearing that wishes to speak, I don't have anyone else on the list, but is there anybody that is joining us via Zoom that wishes to speak to this? I'll ask for a second time. Anybody wish to speak to this public hearing? And a third time, is there anyone that would like to speak to the public hearing before us on Blair Street? All right. Council, questions of staff? I don't see any hands raised. Oh, Councillor Carlson.
Just briefly, have you received any further applications since this came forward for first reading? Are we seeing as I questioned last time, perhaps an onslaught of people trying to get mobile homes before December 31st?
Through the chair to Councillor Carlson, I don't believe we have any that are similar to this application submitted.
Thank you very much.
I have one question, and it has to do with if the intended use is no longer being used for that. So in this example, the aging parent is no longer living in the manufactured home. You stated, I believe, that the manufactured home has to be removed. How difficult and expensive is that? It's not like a trailer that you just pick up and move along. It's a manufactured home.
Yeah, so through the chair, I've actually had no experience with such an action having been enacted on a property owner, so I can't speak to that. Thank you.
I'm just concerned about potential enforcement issues down the road. That's the only thing. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So when we talk modular, are you talking Z240 as a mobile home, or are we talking an E277, which could be a modular home?
Through the chair, I don't know the difference between those structures.
Z240 is a steel frame, and a modular home sits on, could sit on a foundation or sit on blocking.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I believe the most likely the regulations are targeting Z240, but because of they're not saying it specifically, but they're limiting the width of a manufactured home
Okay.
to, I can't remember what the amount is, but basically a single wide mobile.
Okay.
As well, the use states.
Thank you. And would a wastewater practitioner be required in regards to a septic system for this?
Yeah, absolutely would be required.
Alrighty. And have they had any indication of what kind of water service they're going to be using? Would it be a well, or is that we have no idea until time of building permit?
Yeah, at this time, I have no correspondence regarding the type of water service that would service the structure.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I will declare public hearing number 2 closed as well. Thank you, Alex. Okay, I will call to order our regular council evening meeting of July the 12th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. Watch the meeting live or recorded at the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com District of Summerland. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities may connect to the meeting by calling the meeting conference line at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. After I have provided everyone who is pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those on the conference line. Deputy Corporate Officer, do we have any late items to introduce?
There are no late items, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Could I ask for a councillor to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Holm and Councillor Carlson, all in favor? Thank you. And adoption of the minutes of our last evening meeting of June the 28th. Anything there to bring forward? If not, I'll ask someone to bring that forward for adoption. Councillor Traynor, thank you. And Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Great. And then moving right into the bylaws of our public hearings, beginning with 5.1, the zoning bylaw amendment for agritourism accommodation.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the opportunity to present this one. I just wanted to point out some additional bylaw amendments that we are proposing in addition to consideration of third reading now before council. So in addition to the third reading that's before council, following the closure of the public hearing tonight on the proposed zoning bylaw amendments to the agritourism accommodation zoning bylaw amendments, we're also recommending council provide the first 3 readings to business license amendment bylaw number 2021-028, as well as the first 3 readings for the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2021-030. These changes that are being proposed to both these bylaws will be in with regards to the allowance of issuing agritourism accommodation business licenses, as I described in the public hearing. We are proposing that we make some amendments to the business licensing bylaw, specifically with regards to the feedback we heard from the Agriculture Advisory Committee with requirements of the proposed operator for the agritourism accommodation use before we would issue a license, one of which would be entering an agreement with an operator where they would have to agree that they would inform all their patrons to sign a disclosure statement indicating what it means to live on agricultural land and be live in proximity to agricultural uses. That they don't trespass onto adjacent agricultural parcels, and that they'd be aware of the risks of living on an agricultural property, and as well, I think more so of an education piece. There would also be the requirement for neighborhood notification prior to the issuance of a license. And we are also recommending that there would be insurance liability coverage for the operator as well, and additional insurance to cover the operator in an event that something was to happen on their property with the campground use, as an example. Further to that, we are also recommending a change to our fees and charges bylaw to set a license fee amount for agritourism accommodation. The Chamber of Commerce, if you remember from my presentation, recommended a license fee range of between $50 to $100. We are recommending that we use the $100 fee, and that would be increased if it was a building, and if there were bedrooms more than 2 being proposed for the agritourism accommodation use. The Chamber also requested that the revenue from these fees be directed to the Chamber, and the staff's of the impression that, and we do not recommend that we be forwarding this revenue to the Chamber of Commerce, as we feel that the district has negotiated a separate fee-for-service agreement with the Chamber of Commerce for visitor information and tourism marketing purposes, and that kind of creates some structure around our relationship with the Chamber. In addition, we feel that the $100 fee is required to offset some of the staff processing time that will be required to monitor as well as enforce and ensure that these operations are going to be maintained in compliance with our zoning bylaw. Finally, I do want to point out as well that we're recommending the 1-year trial basis be upheld, and we can discuss now about how we want to collect information for council's benefit, but that we report back on the results of this trial basis in October of 2022, and as well engage our committees before bringing forward comments for council's consideration. And this, finally, I want to mention as well that we have also posted a advertisement in this week's paper coming out on the 15th, providing notification for the business license bylaw amendment. And so we're hoping the council consider the first 3 readings, but that notice be provided prior to adoption. And happy to take any questions.
Okay, so I just have a question of process, because we've had a public hearing, and Brad has brought to us kind of 2 different things here. Should we do the zoning amendment first, and just so that we're not bringing new information in after the public hearing is closed, and then deal with the fees and charges? I'm seeing that Brad is nodding his head. That's the way to do this? Okay. All right. So let's first look at consideration of providing 3rd reading to the zoning bylaw amendment for the agritourism accommodation. And this is for all agricultural zones. Councillor Barkwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm looking at the bylaw, thinking about this 1-year trial period. I don't see sort of a sunset date in here, although it might be. How is it sort of brought to a conclusion next year? And you suggested October is a good time to review, which of course makes sense. We want to go through the whole, whatever little bit of this season we get and all of next summer. So how is that sort of in here?
Thanks for the question through the chair. We couldn't specifically provide a date within the zoning bylaw amendments because the zoning bylaw is a regulatory document that does not have fixed dates included in it. So our date that we have, and we're recommending that even council can provide us direction to come bring this back, perhaps through a separate motion, is set at October 2022. We're committing to bringing that back at that date, but we couldn't include that in the zoning bylaw because that would be, it's kind of a permanent bylaw, and if council so chooses to change the bylaw, we would have to go through another zoning bylaw amendment.
Go ahead.
So in essence, this is not a temporary sort of amendment. It's a permanent amendment unless it's changed next year.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, so on the same topic, as was mentioned, October 2022 is an election. So I think before we give that direction, I think we need to decide, is this something that this council wants to review before the election, or is it something that we want to let the next council review? In which case, and either way, I'd say, maybe October 2022 might not be the best month to do it.
Councillor Carlson?
Which is why I asked that perhaps we make that understand now when this will be reviewed. So, I do have some other thoughts and questions, more really around the actual, again, bringing it back to the logistics of this. I think that it might get to be a little more complicated than we think. And I guess that my caution is that it may end up taking a lot more staff time and energy, unless going into this, we have a very clear understanding. This is the document you fill in, and these are all the questions you have to answer. Because, and I don't know if that's been created or if that part of the process has really been thought through. Maybe the chamber's done some of that. This is where you go to register. This is how, like, all of that stuff. It seems like it's going to take a while to organize and to go through that process. And I know that the development services group is already busy with a lot of things. And so I just really, that would be my biggest hesitation, is that if we're going to do this, it has to be done right. But in order to do it right, someone has to really focus in on it for a little while, make sure that they put all the pieces together. I'll just give a little bit more on why I'm thinking this way, because every time you turn around, we get a complaint about an Airbnb, unregulated. We're not doing anything about it. We're not, we don't have something in place for that. And so if you consider someone bringing their RV and another group bringing their RV and another group, and now you have 3 of them all in one place, and now you have literally 3 Airbnbs all side by side on one property. And I guess my concern is that, are we really ready to take that on? And if we are, then I think we should try it and see how it goes. But if it's just going to become this huge nightmare, I think we need to take caution.
Graham?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Carlson. Good question. So we've done a lot of thinking about this, actually, and Obviously, there's some details to be finalized. We're still talking about some things today. But we're very interested in this initiative, and we're going to lean into this to make sure we're successful. Will we have some bumps and scrapes along the way? Absolutely, we will. Absolutely, because it's a pilot. And we are going to learn some things, and we'll be able to make changes and recommend process improvements for the future. But we think it's, for all the reasons that we've already heard as outlined, we think it has significant merit for the tourism movement and support of the agricultural sector here in the district. And so we're committed to making sure that we take the time necessary to do this right.
I think I don't have a lot of concerns about this. One concern that I do have is we've talked a bit about making sure that a disclosure statement is signed by the patron so that they understand, what it's like to be next to another agricultural business and to make sure that they're not trespassing. But as we heard from Ms. Morrow this evening, what if this is a property that is not next to another agricultural property? It's like a residential, agricultural, and agritourism accommodation kind of in the middle. Now, I hear what you're saying with it has to be in the farm plate, but I can see how there might be some concerns with that. Now, from what I understand with this particular property, it's an L-shaped area. And if an application came in that had, for example, this L shape, and the L shape was not part of the home plate, whether or not the person lived there or was leasing the property, that would automatically disqualify them from putting in this kind of tourism, agritourism accommodation, because it wouldn't be on the home plate?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Unless they went through a separate approval process with council at that time.
Like a variance?
That's correct, yeah. To cite it outside the home plate as an example. But it would be a council approval at that point.
Great, okay. Yeah. Okay, that gives me some assurance with that particular piece.
And just to add on, if I may, with Councillor Carlson's concerns, and Council, just a reminder, this is only allowed, and we would be only issuing this use with an existing agritourism activity on site that's defined as per the agricultural land use reserve regulation. So if there is an agricultural property owner that has vacant land and thinks this is a great idea and wants to place a campground, then and they try to come in and do so, the first thing we'll be asking, like, okay, well, what is the agritourism activity on site? Because that's the only way it's permitted in the agricultural land use reserve regulation, right? So I don't see a huge amount of uptake happening. I could be wrong, but the onus is first on the operator to develop this agritourism business before they come in for a campground use. Just to give some concern.
Councillor Traynor and then Councillor Barkwell.
I have a question for staff. I'm just curious about the disclosure statement. I'm wondering who will write it and what weight will it carry? Like when a person comes and signs it, where does it go? Would it be enforced if they were to complain about something? Like, how will it work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what we'll do if council decides to give us direction tonight is we will draft a template agreement to sign with each operator, as well as a template disclosure statement that they could provide their patrons so that it be all consistently, across the district as to how these things will be maintained moving forward. And in terms of enforcement, we would probably defer back to that agreement that was signed with the operator. We do have some bylaw provisions within our zoning bylaw now. If council considers the adoption of the proposed amendments, anything that's listed outside of these criteria could be enforceable through the issuance of a ticket once those zoning bylaw changes are made. And as well, we could enforce separately as per the agreement that was signed with the operator.
Sorry, just one more question for clarification. So the people that come and camp at a farm, they would sign something acknowledging that they're camping on agricultural land, and here's what they can expect. Is that what it would? Okay, so then if they were to, I guess, complain that it was too noisy or something, then the owner could say, well, you sign this. Is that kind of the purpose of it? Okay.
Yeah, good question to the chair. That's kind of it. The purpose, it's an educational, I think, opportunity. There was a lot of discussion at the Agriculture Advisory Committee about people don't understand necessarily the impacts of living on a farm and an operation that's actually ongoing, spraying activities and noise cannons is an example of nuisance issues. So the disclosure statement was to make them aware of the impacts of living on a farm before they come in to try to educate them, as well as head off any of those complaints from coming in.
Prior to this zoning amendment, if you wanted to do camping on your property, you would come for a temporary use permit. And so if you had a plan that didn't conform to this, because maybe your farm home plate isn't appropriate and you have another appropriate location on your property or other things, could you still then do the old route and make a temporary use application and test it out and then apply for an individual zoning change, just like the old days, you might say?
Yeah, good question, Councillor Barkwell, through the chair. Not necessarily. So with the proposed zoning bylaw amendments that are before council tonight would allow agritourism accommodation as an accessory use within the two zones. So therefore it's a permitted use. So the need for a temporary use permit, which deals with use, is no longer required because it's a listed use. However, if there is a proposal that comes in that's, let's say they're wanting to do 10 stalls as an example, because we had an application that had 10 stalls before, and our bylaw only required 3 or only allows 3. That could be now considered as a development variance permit to council versus a temporary use permit. That makes sense.
Well, it's same as anything that's different, like location or. Exactly. Okay, thanks. One more, if I could. Related to the correspondence we had earlier, if you were less than 5 acres, then it would be a site-specific zoning amendment for that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Could I have someone bring forward the motion, please? Councillor Holmes?
That zoning bylaw amendment, agritourism accommodation bylaw number 2021-020 be read a third time.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Carlson? And further discussion on this? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? And I don't see any hands up, so none opposed. Thank you, that carries. And so now are there any questions on the second part? So this is the business license bylaw amendment and fees and charges. Okay, I've got a question. I believe you mentioned, I should take this off. I believe you mentioned that it's $100 fee. That fee is separate from the business. Does it require a business license and a fee? Like for the application to this agritourism accommodation, or are those one and the same?
What we're proposing is that it would have its own business license fee that would be specific to agritourism accommodation, which is $100.
$100,
So it'd
okay.
be only the one fee.
Okay, so there's not an application fee.
It would be the business license application fee. That's it. So when it's ready for issuance, that makes sense.
Okay, so then when you were talking about the administration and the enforcement, you know, including making sure that they have adequate liability insurance and that kind of thing, my question is, how does $100 cover that?
To be quite frank with council, it doesn't. None of our, to be honest, a lot of our fees don't cover the actual cost of processing our applications. There is a requirement for subsidization from taxation for managing all of our application processes. But we have to be reasonable with the applicants because we want to encourage people to apply. So there's a balance that we have to walk in recommending a fee proposed. And we feel $100 is prudent as well. We're basing it somewhat on the Chamber of Commerce recommendation.
And then just another question about the fees. If somebody comes forward with an application and it's an application that requires development variance permit, or I'm not sure if it's given a different name for that, then they would pay for the $100 for that, and then they would have to pay again for the variance permit?
That's correct. In that type of situation, we would process the development variance permit first, because if it's a discretionary approval of council, we want to ensure that council will be wanting to approve that before issuing a license. In that case, that makes sense. So they'd be subject to both fees, but we would maybe just process the DVP first.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
One other question. I see your hand up, Councillor Traynor. Again, with the fees. So now I forgot my train of. I've lost my train of thought here. I'm sorry, I can't remember. I'll come back to myself later. Okay, so Councillor Traynor, you were saying that somebody else had their hand up for you? Councillor Carlson? And then we'll go to you, Councillor Traynor.
We probably have the same question. Council waived business license fees in 2021 for renewals or for new applications as well? Can we suggest that these will not be waived in 2021 because it's a brand new, and it's the only reason we put it in place?
Yeah, you're correct. It's for all business licenses currently for 2021. So perhaps we get a separate motion on with regards to us charging for this specific use.
That was my question as well. And I guess just to follow up, if say we did charge for these, would that, if someone was to get it, say for August 1st, would that carry them all the way to August 1st of next year? Or would they have to get another one in January if they plan for next summer? No, it wouldn't.
So it would only be within the calendar year. And then we would issue renewals out for the 2022 business license year. And they would be part of our renewal list to come in and pay a new fee.
Okay, and just one more quick thought on that. If we are going to put an end date for this trial for next year, which say either is in September or October, then they're only getting 8 months of the business year instead of a full year. So that's just something else to consider when we're thinking about the fee.
Councillor Holmes.
I'm okay with waiving the fee for this year. This is what we decided to do for businesses, and I don't think just because it's a new opportunity that it shouldn't, the same rules shouldn't apply, and especially considering the season's already well underway. There probably won't be that many this year, so I think we should just apply the same principle and might encourage some people to take advantage of it, to try it out. But on the same topic, we also are reviewing our business license fees for next year, so will this be reviewed as well?
Through the chair to answer that question, yes, that is on our work plan to still review our business license fees. If this is included as part of the amendment, it could be reviewed, although I doubt we would recommend at the staff level any changes because we had just brought this forward.
I thought of my other question, but I'm not going to ask it now. It's too subjective, I think. It'd be a difficult one to answer. Okay, if there are there any other questions about this part of the what's before us tonight? Okay, could someone bring forward the second part of that staff recommendation, please? Councillor Holmes.
That business license bylaw amendment, agritourism accommodation, bylaw number 2021-028 be given first, second, and third reading, and that fees and charges bylaw amendment, agritourism accommodation, bylaw number 2021-030 be given first, second, and third reading.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Traynor?
I'll second that, but I just wanted to ask Councillor Holmes something. Did you want to add in anything about waiving for this year and then charging the fee in 2022? Is that part of this?
I think that's, we've already made that decision as a council.
Oh, we
to
did,
waive.
okay.
Yeah.
I thought we had to vote, okay.
Yeah, back in the spring.
No, but for this specific fee, for the business license. Am I not?
Go ahead, Brad.
Maybe I'm not making sense, sorry.
Just to clarify, we do have a previous direction back in February that all 2021 business licenses are waived. So unless we receive a separate resolution for this one, we'll consider that to be the direction.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to the second zoning bylaw amendment that was the subject of the public hearing. That's to consider third reading. Just bring it up here. Okay. Are there any questions that need to be asked for clarification purposes? All right, I'll ask someone to bring forward that recommendation, please, the motion or a motion. Brad.
Sorry to interrupt, but I've just been made aware that the agricultural land use, the ALC has actually made some changes today, and they are now allowing secondary homes within the ALR. So the requirement for the covenant to be registered on title for this application is, I would recommend that we don't register now a covenant with regards to this application. So sorry, this is kind of new information to council. And sorry to kind of put it on the floor, but we could consider third reading and adoption tonight instead of, because we were recommending that third only for the placement of a covenant, but we could go third in adoption.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Because the public hearing has closed, no new information can be considered by council on this amendment.
So we can pass third reading, pretending that we didn't know that, and then follow through with adoption. And we can change the resolution. It's not on the floor yet.
Yet the resolution can be changed at council's will, but just the ability to receive new information about the parameters regarding
Yes.
this item just cannot be
Okay.
received.
Okay. Thank you, Brad, for that. Councillor Barkwell.
Yes, not proceeding with putting a covenant requiring that it be used for family purposes only is a fundamental change to the whole concept here. Is this community going to allow secondary housing units for rental and other uses, or is it still going to remain for family purposes only? So I don't think we should necessarily want to make that decision right now. And without further input and discussion and debate.
Well, I would suggest that once we get a motion on the floor, then we'll have that opportunity, and then we can defer it if we want. We can make that decision just to defer if we don't want to talk about it anymore until we've had some more chance to digest that. It is a little tricky with that information coming just today at the last minute. So I'm not sure. I'm looking to you again, Dallas.
I would suggest, if that would be a potential to change council's mind, that we defer and maybe even consider holding an additional public hearing on this matter, just because the way the bylaw was advertised, it referenced the first and second reading report, which I think clarified that we would be looking for this covenant. So I think that's part of the understanding from the members of the public about the bylaw amendment. So it could potentially change people's support or non-support of this bylaw amendment, should council wish to go that way.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson?
You can remove a restricted covenant at a future date, right? It's not something that stays forever.
Yeah, that's correct. So given the conversation, I guess our recommendation from the staff level would continue forward with third and then placement of the covenant for now until we learn more about this proposed change. So sorry to put that on the floor as an option. So.
Is this just a proposed change at this point?
No.
From the ALC?
I'm just reading a news release.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to let council decide if they want to bring it forward as it is, or if they want to defer this. If we need to go to a public hearing again, whatever it is that someone brings forward, then we'll debate that. Councillor Holmes?
I'll bring forward as it is. A zoning bylaw amendment 11510 Blair Street bylaw number 2021-022 be read a third time, and that council directs staff to prepare a restrictive covenant to place on the land title of 11510 Blair Street to ensure the additional dwelling will be used for family purposes prior to adoption of bylaw number 2021-022.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Barkwell, are you seconding?
Yes.
And would you like to speak to
Yes.
it? Okay, please go ahead.
I'll support the motion as it is because I think the applicant would appreciate moving forward at this time regardless and not wait for a debate as to what the community wants, whether the community wants to restrict it or have it wide open or any potential changes. And so if something changes 5, 10 years down the road or 1 year down the road, he'll always have that option and he can get forward with his plans right now. Or she.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Alex. Okay, on to my mayor's report. On June 30th, I attended the official openings of the reconstruction of the Lakeside Pathway from Peach Orchard Beach to the Lakeside Tennis Courts and the outdoor fitness gym at Memorial Park. My thanks to Councillors Tim Lazard and Clint Gabriel of the Penticton Indian Band, who joined Councillor Barkwell, district staff, and our MLA and MP at these events. The reconstruction of the pathway was funded jointly by the province of BC and the district. The outdoor fitness gym was fully funded by Parks Development cost charges. CAO district staff have done an excellent job on completing both of these initiatives in time for summer enjoyment. I encourage Summerland residents and visitors to enjoy these accessible amenities. The Summerland Legion did not host a Canada Day celebration in Memorial Park this year due to uncertainty about COVID-19 restrictions. For me, July 1st was a day of reflection and thought, as well as profound gratitude that the Syilx Okanagan Nation share their beautiful traditional territory with us. Last Monday, July the 5th, Councillors Carlson, Van Elfen, and Barkwell, and Penticton Indian Band Councillors Lazard, Gabriel, and Charlene Roberts toured the solar site and the proposed eco-village site with senior staff. Council is expecting an update on the environmental assessment and other analysis in August. Ending on a personal note, I received my second vaccine dose on Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to July 21st when I am considered fully vaccinated. A reminder that Interior Health has closed the clinic at the Summerland Curling Club. Vaccinations are being done at the Penticton Trade and Convention Centre, and for those unable to travel, at the Summerland Health Centre, which is the former hospital building. Not the former one that we know, Councillor Barkwell, but just the former one. A pop-up drop-in clinic was open today from 11 to 6 in Memorial Park for first doses and those who had their first dose 49 or more days ago. This clinic runs tomorrow as well for those 12 and over. Information is posted on summerland.ca and the district's social media accounts. And that's all from me. CAO Stat.
Thank you, Your Worship. And for my second dose, I'm going to the Memorial Park tomorrow, day 56. So I'm under the wire and looking forward to it. Okay, so I'm glad to report that our community's response to the Stage 2 water restrictions have been helpful in reducing demand on our water treatment plant. With temperatures staying high, we intend to maintain the restrictions for the foreseeable future and appreciate the patience of the public in working with us to ensure the continued safe and reliable provision of water to all users. As previously noted, these changes are not due to any drought or water shortage issues in our watershed. Rather, the lack of line separation in our system requires that water is distributed primarily from our single treatment plant, which puts pressure on this critical infrastructure during times of high volume. I am pleased to report that the Code of Ethics has been completed in final form, and I intend to table it with Council in our first regular meeting in August for your awareness. The document underscores that we are a values-based public service organization centered upon transparency, respect, honesty, stewardship, and creativity. The Code of Ethics has gone through many drafts and was developed with staff at all levels of the organization. It will be a touchstone for all of us in how we do our work every day for the people of Summerland. Finally, on the staffing side of things, in addition to our new corporate officer, Kendra Kinsley, starting on August 3rd, 2021, I am glad to inform Council that we have now concluded interviews for the Director of Works and Infrastructure. We received an excellent response on that competition and conducted 13 interviews over the last week. A preferred candidate has been selected, and we are just now working through the final offer stages and will hopefully be in a position to provide more details in a few days. Special thanks to our General Manager of Utilities, Jeremy Storvold, while he covers off in an acting capacity for that important role. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone waiting on the line to speak to council this evening?
Not as part of the public comment opportunity section.
Okay, thank you. So we'll get on to development reports. The first one is 9.1, development variance permit for 16423 Keene Street. And Alex is speaking to this one.
Alrighty. So the district has received an application for variance at 16423 Keene Street. The proposal seeks to vary the maximum coverage allowed within the farm home plate, as well as the maximum retaining wall height in order to facilitate a residential addition and renovation. Previously, the District of Summerland received an application for a non-adhering residential use within the Agricultural Land Reserve on October 15th, 2020. The intent of this application was to consider a renovation to the existing house at 16423 Keene Street, which included expanding the footprint of their garage and building a secondary suite. As a property within the ALR, the proposed development is required to comply with Agricultural Land Commission regulations in addition to the District of Summerland policies and regulations. Of particular importance, this application was the size restriction prescribed in section 20.1.1b of the Agricultural Land Commission Act, which stipulates that the total floor area of principal residences must be 500 square meters or less. The applicants proposed to increase the total floor area of the house from then 490 square meters to 535.8 square meters. As such, proceeding with this development required ALC approval of a non-adhering residential use to increase the size of the principal residence to be greater than 500 square meters. On December 14th, 2020, the District of Summerland Council passed a resolution to forward that non-adhering residential use application to the ALC for consideration. After consideration of the ALC, the application was refused on the grounds that there was no agricultural justification for the proposed increase to the size of the residential dwelling. Following this decision, the proponent has come forward with a revised plan that includes a smaller addition to the principal residence, reconfiguration of the existing deck space, and removal of the pool house. Although now less than 500 square meters, the new plan still requires an increase to the lot coverage of the principal residence within the farm home plate. In addition, an overheight retaining wall is being proposed to replace an existing failing retaining wall on the property that will also require variance to the district's zoning bylaw. Zoning bylaw section 8.1.5C limits the amount of lot coverage to 35% within the property's farm home plate. A farm home plate in the zoning bylaw is meant to limit the residential usage of agricultural properties. Specifically, a farm home plate is defined as a 905 square meter area of the agricultural property where a residence and other structures related to that residence are permitted. The remainder of the agricultural lot outside of the farm home plate is meant to be used for agricultural purposes. The owners have applied to increase the amount of allowable coverage to 43% of the farm home plate, to allow for the proposed addition and renovation to the existing single detached home. The subject property is currently used for agriculture and residential purposes. An orchard occupies a fair portion of the property on the east side of the existing home. The existing farm home plate at 16423 Keene Street is well contained on the property. However, the existing home and related structures already exceeds the bylaw allowance for farm home plate coverage, measuring at 49%, or currently 449 square meters. The home was constructed prior to the A1 regulations being in place, speaking to the farm home plate coverage. The new development proposal, although requesting to increase the allowable coverage within the farm home plate from 35% to 43%, is actually leading to an overall reduction in the previous home's footprint. The proposal includes an expansion of the principal residence, reconfiguration of the existing deck space, and removal of the pool house. As a result, the farm home plate coverage would actually be reduced from 449 square meters to 414 square meters. Staff are supportive of this proposed variance to facilitate the reduction in farm home plate coverage overall. The proposed development also involves the reconstruction of a retaining wall that will exceed the district's maximum height allowance as identified by section 5.5.4. The intent behind this retaining wall height regulation is to prevent the construction of imposing monolithic walls that would fundamentally alter the character of a neighborhood and have visual impacts on neighboring parcels. This also prevents the artificial altering of landscapes to dramatically increase grade for building purposes. The site plan identifies the proposed retaining wall as being located in the rear yard of the home on the property. The maximum height of the proposed retaining wall will be 2.6 meters. The zoning bylaw minimum spacing requirement will be maintained for the tiered portions of the wall. The retaining wall will not be highly visible from adjacent properties or from Keene Street. This wall is required in order to replace the existing failing wall shown in the photo. A structural design sealed by a professional engineer will be required to address any geotechnical, structural, and water concerns at the time of building permit. The proposed retaining wall height variance will allow the property owners to replace an existing wall and allow for improved site stability. The variance to the farm home plate will allow the property owners to conduct an addition and renovation that ultimately decreases the residential footprint on the property. These variances are being recommended for approval due to their limited impacts on adjacent landowners and on overall neighborhood character. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, do you have questions of staff? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In reading the responses from the Ministry of Agriculture, I find it very interesting that point number 4, agriculture interests are unaffected. However, there does not appear to be an agricultural reason for the request. And the other where it says the proposed addition would occupy current existing driveway and the expanded house would remain less than 500 square meters. So we've got quite a disconnect between the ALC and the Ministry of Agriculture in regards to the 500 square meters. Seems to me we've put these homeowners into quite the precarious position with 2 provincial bodies not being on the same page.
Yeah, so to the chair, this is something we oftentimes see with these provincial bodies. We receive referral responses oftentimes based upon the individual that's responding, and they vary greatly, unfortunately, sometimes. So yeah, it is something that we commonly see. We get different opinions back from these bodies at times, so yeah.
If I may, Madam Mayor? So if we're getting different opinions from 2 provincial bodies, and we're putting distress on the owners, why are we not making our own decision in regards to this, but we're relying on the Agricultural Land Commission to dictate to us? I'm just having a bit of an issue with this. We see this all the time, but what we're seeing here is bureaucratic red tape that we have fallen into, and it seems like we're not doing anything about it. We're just going as a status quo. Thanks.
Brad?
Yeah, if I can answer that one, if there was a question there, I think that as part of our normal application process, we send a referral out to these provincial agencies. We also send them out to other agencies. They don't always apply, or they apply with saying their interests are unaffected. Ministry of Transportation being one, Interior Health being another. So often, though, we do get great comments back from both the Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural Land Commission. And Alex is right. Sometimes they vary between the two of them. However, they're only referral comments. So there's nothing in here that is required of council to follow. If there is a application to the ALC, that would be a subject to a separate application process, but a development variance permit is strictly at the discretion of council. So it's just feedback and information to support council's deliberation. That's it.
Thank you, Brad. Was it not in the report, though, that the ALC came back and said it was over 500 square meters? So the owners then took out or reduced a pool house and did some further drawing modifications to fall below 500 square meters based on ALC, but yet based on Ministry of Agriculture, they were under 500. So I guess not a question, more of a comment that it seems to me we made people go through a complete design change over one ministry over the other. So I guess one ministry that's more restrictive than what the other ministry had said. So thank you, just venting, thank you.
All right. So are there questions, staff? Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So don't we have our own size restriction for 500 square meters? Or I don't remember.
No, we don't, but we do defer to site coverage within the farm home plate. That's the subject of this variance. So that's our size requirement for all structures within the farm home plate. I don't believe we have 500 meters within our zoning bylaw.
So you could build a 10,000 square meter house on agricultural land, and as long as you get your variance, I guess, on your farm home plate, or
Well, that would be that, but also there would also be the Agricultural Land Commission approval. So
what do they need? Okay, so is it a referral or an approval?
as soon as it gets over 500 meters, it does go to an ALC application. So sorry, I misinterpreted the Councillor Patton's previous question there. But yes, this application was subject to a non-adhering residential use application that was denied by the ALC.
So was it flat? No, you can't do this.
Over the 500 meters
Yeah.
squared. That's correct. He's correct.
Okay. Thank you. So in effect, we have a de facto limit within our municipality established by the ALC. Yeah.
And what's before us tonight is not the 500 square meters, it's the coverage going, yes. Effectively, it's a decrease in coverage, right? Yeah. Okay. Are we ready to bring forward a motion? If there are no other questions, staff, Councillor Barkwell.
I move that council authorize issuance of a development variance permit DVP 21-008 for property located at 6315 Victoria Road, legally described as Lot 2, District Lot 2196, Sucius Division, Yale, District Plan KAP 43882, and that a variance to the following sections of zoning bylaw 2000-450 be granted. That lot coverage within the farm home plate section 8.1.5C to vary the maximum lot coverage within the farm home plate from 35% to the 43% proposed, and to the maximum retaining wall height section 5.5.4 to vary maximum height of a retaining wall from 2 meters permitted to 2.6 meters proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwood.
Just
Your
one,
second,
just one question. It reads as described as lots 2. Is it just one lot? Lot 2, district lot.
I think that may be just a typo.
Yeah.
Should be
a
just
typo?
lot 2.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, thank you. And Councillor Patton, you said you would second.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, did you wish to speak to that as well, or you're
No,
good?
I'm good with it. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? And opposed? None, so that carries. Thank you. Now on to 9.2, temporary use permit 2920 to 3240 Landry Crescent, temporary use permit number 21-009. Brad.
Thank you. I'll just wait for the presentation slides for this one. Thanks, Greg. It's sorry, that's the, okay, thank you. Great, thank you. So the district's in receipt of a temporary use permit application for the placement of a temporary sales center at 3240 Landry Crescent. This property, you can see on the map before you currently, is at the north tip of Trout Creek, along Okanagan Lakeshore, and along the Landry Crescent roadway, and just adjacent to the campground to the west. Next slide, please. The subject property is currently designated within the district's official community plan as residential medium density, and also it's zoned as a medium density residential use. Within this zone, there is a listed use defined as cluster housing development, which is the intent of the proponent is to follow this intended use and develop a 45 unit residential strata subdivision on the subject property. That would be in the form of a mix of small form single family residential as well as duplex housing throughout the subject property. To allow for this development and still to be approved by the district is a multifamily development permit and also a strata subdivision approval that will be subsequently reviewed and approved to allow for the development. Next slide. So the subject property is also subject to a watercourse development permit, which was issued by the District of Summerland in August of 2020 last year. Previously, this subject property was subject to a proposed 12-lot residential fee simple subdivision proposal. And it was at that time that the watercourse development permit was issued. And the riparian area has been defined as part of this riparian assessment, or the watercourse development permit that has been issued. And Lakestream Environmental is a qualified environmental professional that's providing guidance to the development as it goes forward under the issued permit. Next slide. So the proposal before council tonight is specifically with regards to the temporary sales center placement for the consideration of the temporary use of the sales center on the property. Given that the property is currently zoned residential, the district needs to go through a temporary use permit consideration for the allowance of a commercial and retail use on a residential zone property. The site plan before you currently proposes the sales center to be located facing Langy Crescent on temporary skids and cribbing, that there be no permanent infrastructure installed other than power and a temporary water connection. As well, there is the plan, you can't really see it too well on the screen, but to the right of the building is a location for portable toilets to be planned and located on the property to be ancillary to the temporary sales center use. As well, 7 parking stalls are delineated in the front of the sales center building that's being proposed. Next slide, please. The hours of the operation of the sales center will be is proposed to be noon to 6 p.m. daily and closed Sundays, and that's actually written within the drafted temporary use permit that's before council tonight. The applicant also estimated that on average the sales center will see 5 to 10 groups per day and roughly 2 to 3 people per group estimated. So at any one time, they're expecting 6 to 12 patrons at one time to be on the site, unless they are choosing to hold some sort of special marketing event, which they would probably apply for a special event permit for that consideration. Next slide. The applicant also proposes to have a temporary use permit issued for a 3-year timeline. They are forecasting that they may only need the sales center for roughly a 1-year time period, but with uncertainty with the number of uptake of residential unit sales, they wanted to request the full 3-year allowance under the Local Government Act for temporary use, and that's how the proposed drafted permit is before council tonight. Next slide. So currently, and if you've driven by the area, you actually know that there is a building that's already been placed on site, and they're currently doing work on it. The building permit, a building permit wasn't required for the placement of the building because their building department determined that it was a temporary building, and for that reason, they were allowed to go ahead. Next slide. So we had a discussion at the Advisory Planning Commission. There was some discussion on the time frame with the applicant in the meeting, and there was some clarification from members as to what would happen if there was a request for renewal past the 3-year time period, which would be treated like a new application and brought back before the APC. So they were comfortable with that answer. And with other than that, there was no specific concerns with regards to this proposed temporary use on the property. Next slide. In terms of other consultation, the developer has hosted their own developer information meeting in June. There was a total of 6 people, I believe, that attended that information meeting that were members of the public. Most of the questions, I believe, were more geared to the actual development versus the temporary sales center. And as well, we've done our legislative consultation with advertisement in the Summerland Review, and as well as to adjacent landowners. So with regards to staff's recommendation, we feel that that the use of a temporary use permit is seen and recommended by staff to be used when there is a true temporary use that's being proposed for a parcel, and we feel that this is a temporary use, and it's justified to be able to approve it because the developer will be motivated to move the sales center off the property once they've done enough sales, and to also complete their development in accordance with their ultimately build out of their development property. I do want to recognize too, as well, that we have a number of representatives of the applicant, including the developer and their consultants that are on the line. So if there are any questions of the applicant, council can direct them to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Questions? Councillor Carlson?
I think I would be remiss not to ask, since it's come up again, and we're in the location along a public access walkway. Currently, my understanding is the property is zoned for 12 single-family lots, but that would be changing. My question comes back around to what is the proposal for waterfront, lakefront access, including how many docks and/or berths for boats are being considered for this piece of property along the lake, and how are we going to ensure that public access remains along that foreshore?
Just to clarify, is that a question to staff or to the applicant?
Whoever has the answer, I would appreciate. It doesn't matter if it's staff or the applicant.
Well, I guess I'll start. Currently before council's temporary use permit, as part of the multifamily development permit, we will be looking at the overall site plan of the proposed development. We are also proposing to come forward to council for consideration of approval of that development permit. And at that point, there would be the opportunity for public comment on the proposed access to the water, as well as the overall site plan of the site, how it relates to the residential units, the landscaping, the retention of the riparian area, and all of the above. But tonight is specifically with regards to the sales center.
Thank you. I will continue to bring up this issue because I do believe that putting another dozen docks along that lakefront will be detrimental not only to the foreshore and to the natural habitat down there, but also to the overall impact on that site of the general public who currently utilize it. There's not a lot of undisturbed foreshore left along Okanagan Lake, and so I do think that it's important that we're aware of it and that we're talking about it right from this very beginning piece. Not saying they shouldn't be allowed to put in a dock, but I do think we need to make sure that it's thought through properly.
Other questions? I have a question for you, Brad. In the presentation slides, it shows the, I guess, temporary facility there. And I'm wondering what the process is. I think you said that no permit was required because it was a temporary structure. Is that right?
It did not require a building permit. It does require the issuance of the temporary use permit to allow the retail use.
Okay. I find it a little odd that a building of that size could be plunked down there. Clearly, there's been, soil disturbance and soil maybe brought in and all of that. I guess my question, though, is seeing that that has already been done, and I realize that it's just a very small portion of the property. Regarding our conversation up in the hills the other day, I'm wondering if there has been any discussions with the archaeological sensitivities of that area next to the water with the Penticton Indian Band.
I can take a crack at that, but actually I would like to defer that a bit to the applicant if council wouldn't mind hearing an answer from them on that question. I do know in talking with the applicant that they have had an archaeological study completed for the site. And I cannot comment on whether they've had engagement with PIB.
Dear Mayor Boot, dear Council, my name is David Todman. I am attending on behalf of Kirkhoff Development, and I can speak to the engagement of an archaeological consultant. We are working with Similkameen Consulting, who has done extensive site investigations, documented any findings, and just concluded its review process with the Penticton Indian Band in support of the application for site alteration permit, which is required from the province's archaeological branch in order to proceed with any site works. And I do believe we're waiting to hear back a confirmation from Similkameen that this application has been submitted to the province. In a separate process, we've also reached out to the Penticton Indian Band for general support of the project. There are several permits that we require from the District of Summerland, from the province, due to the findings on site, due to the intention of the plans for a dock. And we feel that the Penticton Indian Band should be part of this process, and we're hoping to gain their support shortly.
Okay, well, my question, I'll put directly to you then. My question is, there is a building there now, temporary or not. Clearly, the area has been cleared and disturbed. And my question is, has there been any archaeological assessment for cultural or archaeological sensitivities? It's right near the water. That's what my question is.
And the answer is
not whether or not you've got support on the way. I'd like to know if that engagement has been done with the Penticton Indian Band.
So yes, understood. There has been extensive investigations. I believe over 100 test holes have been excavated, and faunal remains and lithic scatter has been found by Similkameen consultants. This is identified in an extensive report, and the Similkameen is coordinating as necessary for such archaeological findings with the Penticton Indian Band.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barkwell?
So if some archaeological artifacts are found, who decides how much additional work needs to be done, and yeah, you know, what's the next step and who makes those decisions?
I'm assuming that's a question to me.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
I know that
so
Brett
as far as I
can
understand the process, I'm a development manager, not an archaeological consultant. The process is such that a permit is required from the archaeological branch from the province. Currently, we hold a permit to perform site investigations, under which all the current works are performed. In order to commence the full development of the site, a site alteration permit is required from the archaeological branch from the province, which we have just submitted, as far as I understand, from Similkameen. And within this permit, there are the obligations for monitoring, for example, through the archaeological consultant, through the band. Certain works are described, and any other constraints or implications that need to be adhered to are outlined in this permit and in our application.
Did you get the answer you're looking for?
Yes, it sounds like the province specifies what happens next, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, and Councillor Barkwell.
So when would this sales center be put into use as a sales center?
We're currently targeting, subject to council approval, the middle of August, I believe August 20th.
Is it putting the cart before the horse if you've got a sales center without subdivision, strata approvals and the other permits that are required?
So there are distinctions according to the Real Estate Marketing Act. At this point, we don't have the ability to sale that requires development permit approval. At this point, it's simply an awareness campaign.
So it's not really a sales center, it's an information center.
Up to the,
Yeah.
at this point.
Graham?
So
And just for council's awareness, that also came up in the public information center, and that was identified to the public in that session that until they get a development permit approval, it operates as an information center.
Okay, did you want to add anything, Brad? You're good? Okay. Other questions? Okay, could I have someone bring forward a motion, please? Councillor Barkwell?
The council authorized issuance of a temporary use permit, TUP 21009. We've had 9. For a temporary sales center at 2920-342 or 3240 Landry Crescent, Lot 5, District Lot 477, Plan KAP 82140.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Patton? Has Landry Crescent, I mean, I'm just noticing the address, 2920, 3240. On the plan, on the map that we saw, it showed the lot 3240. Has 32, oh, maybe that doesn't make sense. I'm wondering where the 2920 comes in. Has it already been subdivided and has to be rezoned?
I can clarify that one. So I believe that we might have jumped the gun a bit on with regards to the addressing of the proposed site when it was proposed as a 12-lot subdivision. The 2920 to 3240 was a list of addresses provided for the 12-lot subdivision. And so its range is basically what it is listed right now currently on titles. So, or within our addressing system. We are with the Strata subdivision application, we would be proposing to amend all the addresses, of course, for the new proposal, so that civic addressing will most likely change.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, is there any further discussion now that we have the motion on the floor? I'll call the question. All in favor? And any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. And finally, for the development services, our monthly activities report, and this is for Brad again.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So, with regards to our monthly update on development services activities, I wanted to point out a few things with regards to our various different department areas. I do want to mention as well that this is for both the months of May and June. I apologize, I wasn't able to get a report out to council in June. So we decided, given that this is our only formal meeting of council in July, to combine the two months together and come at the first meeting here of July and report on both months. So with regards to planning applications for May and June, you can see that we're still quite high with regards to number of subdivisions. We're halfway through the year. We're already at 10 subdivisions. Comparing that to last year at 11 for the whole year. And as well, a lot of the subdivisions that are coming forward and that we're actually reviewing and approving as well at the same time are bringing a number of lots onto the market. We just had a recent application for Blakeborn Avenue, which is proposing 17 single-family residential lots. We've just recently also provided final approval subject to a servicing agreement for the Nixon Road development in Trout Creek, which brings in 21 residential lots. We've previously approved Treffy Place as well in Trout Creek, which brings 13 residential lots. So that's all to say that we should expect a lot of building permits being brought forward in the near future with regards to those new subdivisions coming online. And that will hopefully help address some of our housing supply concerns within the community and given the market conditions right now. Next slide, please. With regards to building permits, we've got 113 total building permits to date up until the end of June. This amount represents the second highest amount we've had over the last 5 years. I think 2019, you can see at 120, was the only higher up until this date. Our building officials are still working fairly hard and trying to process our building permits in a timely fashion. And I'm happy to state that we're continually meeting our targeted timeline of 3 weeks for the issuance of building permits to issuance. One of the comment I have here for council is that if we're now currently seeing some trends maybe going the other way with regards to lumber prices and coming back down the earth. So that may spur additional building activity if those prices continue to fall. I guess my moral of my story is that this more activity can be expected moving forward. Next slide. With regards to bylaw enforcement, to date, up until the end of June, our bylaw enforcement team have processed 528 bylaw files to date. You can see here, just in terms of monthly, I believe for May here, we had a grand total of 50 in that month. Next slide, please. In June, we had 46, and then one more slide. And then so year to date, like I said, we're at 528 total files, and you can see the breakdown of where those areas that have been the subject of those files, a lot dealing with traffic. We've seen just recently in May and June an uptick in the number of files for property maintenance, as well as parks and public land usage complaint files, while still traffic is persisting moving forward, especially with parking issues now, perhaps around our beaches and park areas being of concern. And just for council's benefit, moving forward from this date, we'll be presenting stats on our new Good Neighbor bylaw so that council can consider the impact of that recent bylaw amendment or new bylaw and number of enforcement files that we're opening up with regards to that bylaw. And I'm happy to take any questions on my presentation, as well as the current applications that are listed in the staff report.
Any questions on that presentation of stats for May and June? I notice there's no COVID bylaw numbers reported in June.
Can we say yay?
What was that?
Can we say yay that there's no COVID?
Can we say yay? Yes. Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
It's great that we're meeting our 3-week turnaround time on permits, and I'm going to take the opportunity to do a little boasting about that to other people I know from some other communities.
Okay, boast away. Would you also like to bring forward the motion to receive this report for information?
that the May and June 2021 Development Services Monthly Report be received for information.
Great, thank you, Councillor Burkwell. Seconded. Councillor Holmes, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Now we are on to item 11, business arising from Committee of the Whole and closed sessions, and 11.1, a resolution that was brought forward from our last closed session on June the 28th, that Council received the Summerland Arts and Cultural Centre lease and management agreement report from the Director of Community Services dated June the 28th, 2021 as information, and that Council authorized the Mayor and Corporate Officer to execute the lease agreement as attached to the report. Any comments on this resolution? Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you. I would just, for the record, I would just like to state why I was opposed to this motion. I don't think the joint management of the building is the right model for us. I think it has the potential of leading to some confusion and even friction between the two managing parties, and there's a risk of the building being left underutilized as a result. I think the better model would be the Lear House in Penticton, which is owned by the City of Penticton, but managed by the Penticton Arts Council. And that model has served Summerland well in the past. If you look at the museum, our youth center, the sailing association, the yacht club, the golf club, all these facilities which are owned by the municipality, there's no reason why the municipality couldn't be joint managing those or even entirely managing them. But I think there's been an understanding developed over the years that nonprofits can do a better job and at a less cost. The only joint management facility that was referenced when making our decision was the Center Stage Theatre, and that's not entirely the same thing because it's two public center entities, ourselves and the school board, managing that, and in fact outside. And yeah, I think you have to question even if that's a successful model for the community. I think it's been great for the school board. They get new soundboards, new stage curtains and whatnot, and don't have to pay for it. Whereas outside school use, it's probably the most underutilized public facility in Summerland. When I look at the reasons why the district wants to be involved in the management of the Arts and Cultural Center, I don't think it has much to do with arts and culture. I think it's more so the rec department can program recreation out of the building. And I don't believe that's a good enough reason. In fact, it's the wrong reason. And I believe an arts and cultural center should be for arts and culture. So that's why I was opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any notices of motion tonight? Okay. And on to information items. Correspondence, there are three pieces of correspondence. Anyone like to bring anything forward? Councillor Traynor.
I just wanted to briefly share with Council what we discussed at our last RDOS meeting. We had a presentation from the Kwantlen Polytech University team that worked on this brochure called Bringing Our Food System Home, a report on the Okanagan Bioregion Food System Project. And it was a really interesting presentation. And basically, the Okanagan bioregion includes the North Okanagan, the Central Okanagan, and the Okanagan-Similkameen region. And the goal of the project was to conduct research and collect local level data describing the economic, social, and ecological outcomes of a regional food system. It's hoped that this information will help decision makers like ourselves build and strengthen our regional food system. And a regional food, I'll just quickly describe what a regional food system is. It's where the resources, people, and activities that provide communities with food. It includes the flows of materials, knowledge, money, and labor involving farming, fishing, hunting, and the distribution, processing, retail, preparation, and waste management, all around food. Right now, most of our food is, a lot of it is imported. And in Canada, this is interesting to know, 5 companies control 80% of the grocery retail market. So the goal of this project is to really regionalize our food systems so that we can produce our own food and meet the needs of our growing population. The report had 4 sections that looked at scenarios and indicators, current conditions, scenarios for 2050 as the Okanagan population continues to grow, and it had also a section on planning for the future. So if other council members or the public want to take a look at it, like I said, it's really well done and it's interesting. And there is a link in my report that I submitted where you can go and read it online. But one more thing I wanted to share was some key takeaways for our council that I thought were interesting. On page 71 of the report, they said that we need to think regionally and work together, that the boundaries of the bioregional food system must be addressed through a collaborative process that involves Indigenous and non-Indigenous governments, community organizations, civil society, and the private sector. I found this one the most interesting. They also suggested adopting a food system lens. So kind of like we apply a cultural lens when we look at reports that come to us, or a climate action lens, that when we're making decisions involving planning and policy development, that we incorporate food systems thought into our decisions. So that involves land use and zoning, economic development, and social and climate change planning. There's 2 more points. The authors also said or suggested that we continue to collect local data on our food systems within Summerland and our region, and the performance and to look at how they're doing. They said that most data right now is collected at a provincial and federal level, and that it's focused on economic growth and outcomes. They said that evaluating data related to food system performance must also consider outcomes related to our health, community and individual well-being, and ecological integrity. And finally, another point for us was food system inequalities disproportionately affect Indigenous and racialized communities across Canada. So when we adopt policies, we really need to consider that. And yeah, those were the 4 main points that I took away from the last section of the report. So again, it's available online, and it's very well written and easy to understand. And if you have any questions, I can try to answer them, or maybe Councillor Holmes can. And I believe Mayor Boot also wanted to add something to this after any questions.
Questions of Councillor Traynor or Councillor Holmes? Okay, I just wanted to add a little bit. Along with the report itself that Councillor Traynor has just shown us, one of the things that the Regional District Okanagan-Similkameen, who put $50,000 into this project, that we wanted to see was policy, I guess really policy gaps and things that we can do at the local government level. As everyone knows, there's a lot of federal government policies and provincial government policies when it comes to food. It has to be safe, and there's all kinds of different groups that are involved, different agencies that are involved, but there is something that we can do at the local government policy level. And as it happens, our Director of Development Services, when he was working for the Regional District Okanagan-Similkameen, was part of the advisory committee for this project, as was I. And the most valuable piece for me as someone that's in local government, and I think around the table, arguably, the most amazing piece is the policy assessments and policy briefs that are not part of the report, but standalone items that refer to various areas in the report. And on their website, where you can read this report, there are 6 different one food policy assessment in this area, and then 5 policy briefs, including supporting local post-production sector development, which is what we heard from Mr. Delavet earlier today, which is what the whole South Okanagan Agricultural Food Project is. And attached to that are policy and planning initiatives, recognizing that it's really important, should be part of your official community plan, even if it's part of your agricultural plan within your OCP, zoning to support that kind of post-production. It mentions the work that Summerland has been doing in terms of working towards getting the South Okanagan Agricultural Food Hub here, and doing the feasibility studies and the post-production infrastructure that's really important. So these policy briefs are really good for local government because it points out what we as local government elected officials can do to help push our way forward into something that is more regional for our food system. So that's what I wanted to add. So thank you for that, Councillor Traynor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a really good report, and it's very easy to read and understand. So I highly recommend, if you've got some time, going online. And a lot of work went into it, and a lot of money. And I think that there's a lot of valuable takeaways from it.
Any other pieces of correspondence folks would like to bring forward? Okay. No, we'll go on to the committee and commission minutes. Park and Recreation Advisory Committee of March the 2nd. Anything that anyone wants to bring forward out of that? Okay, could I have someone bring forward a motion to receive correspondence and committee and commission minutes for information, please? Councillor Holmes, seconded by Councillor Patton. All in favor? Great, thank you. Okay, on to councillor reports. Let's start with Councillor Carlson tonight.
I have nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barkwell?
Nothing other than the same events that you've referred to already, but I did want to note the presentation we had from the lady this morning on the creation story. I thought it was really interesting. And when she was speaking about the using everything and returning to the earth, I was thinking about the organics project that we have going, and perhaps when we have our grand opening, we should invite representatives from the PIB.
I think that would be a fantastic idea. I meant to actually add that to the mayor's report, so thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Barkwell. I very much enjoyed that presentation this morning. Councillor Holmes. Okay, Councillor Patton.
No report this week, Madam Mayor.
All right, and Councillor Traynor, anything more to add?
Just one quick thing, the Summerland Ornamental Gardens are now open until 8 o'clock. Up until, I believe, July 5th, they were only open till 6, so you can go up there now when it's a little bit cooler at night and enjoy it, and it looks really, really nice up there. The volunteers are doing an awesome job at gardening, and they've got like a vegetable garden, and it looks really nice up there, and we're so lucky to have that asset. So I encourage everyone to go and check it out.
Good. Go for a walk in the ornamental gardens, and then a little workout at the outdoor fitness gym in Memorial Park. Yeah. All right. Anyone on the line to speak with us tonight? Dallas or Greg? No. Could I'll ask for adjournment then. Councillor Patton, Councillor Holmes, all in favor?